Hello students, it's me, Mr. Weaver. Right now I want to give you a brief video that details my thoughts as I'm reading chapter 1 of Lord of the Flies. What am I thinking about as a experienced reader when it comes to this wonderful chapter? First of all, we start with the title, The Sound of the Shell. We have two things here. We have a shell, which is a concrete object and obviously symbolic in this novel, as you already know. Then we have the sound. What sound does that shell make? If you have ever listened to the sound of a conch shell, which I have one right here, you know that it makes kind of a low sound. It's kind of a sad, dolorous sound. Let me see if I can demonstrate. And you can imagine that sound going through the trees as these boys are on the island. So that kind of sad but piercing sound that goes through the trees is what we're left with in this chapter. Looking through the beginning of the book, as you can tell on this sheet here, these notes, we have the setting. It's a lush environment. It's very, very hot, and that never leaves except for in chapter 9 in this whole novel. Does it ever do anything but be hot on this island? There are things called creepers. Obviously, the creepers are the undergrowth, the roots, and the vines and such. And even that word itself kind of has a very ominous connotation to it. There's a lot of fruit. It's abundant, but it obviously does things to the digestive system of the boys. There's a lot of granite protruding in the island, a very hard pink substance that's rock and it's solid. And around that is the growth in the sand and the water. And we have the mountain. There's one distinct mountain on this island, and we have the platform. The platform is this piece of granite on which is some soil, but the soil is not very deep, so the palm trees grow up and then they die before they get very tall. They fall in a crisscross pattern, and this is where the boys meet when they're having their meetings. We have the characters that are on the island. Of course, we have the character Ralph, and in my other videos about the characters, you can watch those. He's the good guy. And yet he has a snake clasped for a belt, which I think is interesting because normally the snake is a representation of evil. So here he is, the good protagonist on the island, but even so, there is that snake around his waist. We have Piggy, the intellectual. He's asthmatic. He has asthma. He can't see very well. He's myopic. He's nearsighted. And he is also overweight. And I'll just use Golding's word, he's fat. And so because of that, he is limited and he has very low self-worth, self-esteem, insecure. He's kind of desperate for friendship. And we see that Ralph is not. In fact, even though he only knows of Piggy on the island, he does not naturally want to befriend him. He's annoyed by him. We have Jack, who is very confident, arrogant, ugly. That's Golding's word. He has red hair. He has a snake clasp for his robe that he wears. When he's turning in that cloak, it's very ominous, evil-sounding diction that Golding uses on purpose to make him seem a little untrustworthy. And obviously his personality is extreme. He's a good leader, and Golding even says that. But on the other hand, there's this arrogance about him. And so we don't trust him. Then we have Simon, who the first time we meet him, he faints, actually. We learn a couple pages later that he's fainted. And we know that he is quiet, he's timid, but once he gets on the route with the other two boys, there's a calmness about him, there's a confidence with him, but it's not the same kind of confidence as Ralph. There is a very peaceful kind of confidence with Simon, but he's also very shy, timid, demure. Next we have Roger, and the only thing we know about him is that he has very dark hair, and then he's the one suggesting they have a vote, which I think is kind of ironic, interesting, considering what he does later in the novel, which I won't reveal. And then finally, as far as really important characters go, we have Sam and Eric, these two twins, and that's all I'll say about them at this point. We have several different kinds of conflict going on. We have this confidence of Ralph versus the insecurity of Piggy, and the two of them together, it's kind of awkward, right? And we have Ralph trying to get away and Piggy trying to cling. And it causes kind of some conflict for us as a reader as we read this, and we realize that boys, even though they only have each other, they're not getting along. We have the betrayal of Ralph when he tells the boys his name is Piggy, and he doesn't really give an apology, more of a, well, at least they don't call you fatty, and I'm sorry you feel that way, right? The typical way of saying, I don't really apologize, but it's a bummer you feel that way. So we have that conflict. Eventually, Piggy kind of goes back to the platform, and it says that the blush in his cheek fades, so he kind of gets over it. And then finally, we have the leadership struggle, which is obviously very big. And it's important that that leadership struggle between Jack and Ralph is resolved with the shell. I don't know if you noticed it, but when they vote, all the choir boys vote for Jack, and everyone else, except Piggy, votes for Ralph. But then when Piggy looks around and see that no one else, that everyone has voted, he goes ahead and slips his hand up. So that's left with the obvious question, who is he going to vote for? Himself. Okay, Piggy thinks to himself he could be a leader. He obviously has the intellectual fortitude. He has a lot of knowledge, but he just doesn't have that leadership. So we have three kind of different leadership styles that all come to the fore even in the first chapter. We don't really see any leadership style from Simon, but we see leadership style from Piggy, from Ralph, and from Jack. And we need to analyze that as we continue reading this novel. Then after they vote, they break away on an excursion, the three boys, Jack, Ralph, and Simon, and they have a friendship when they get to the top of the mountain. In fact, it says as they are on the top of the mountain that they feel a sense of friendship. It says very clearly at the bottom of page 29, eyes shining, mouths open, triumphant, they savored the right of domination. They were lifted up, were friends. And so at the top of the mountain, which place is important in this novel, at the top of the mountain, the first time, there is a sense of friendship and domination. That's going to change very much later in the novel at the top of the mountain. And then there is the playful exploration. They are climbing through creepers. They are pushing boulders down hills. They're saying whizow and wizard. And they're really having a very good time. And then finally, when they get to the top of the mountain, they look at it, and it's in the shape of a boat, which might be very significant, especially at the very last page of the novel, which I won't say why. But the fact that the island is shaped like a boat is probably important. And it also says that there is an extra island that extends off of the main island. It's kind of like a peninsula. It's described as a bastion, right, which is a big fortress. That's going to come into play later on. I won't say why, but pay attention to those details because they do come up later. Finally, let's talk about the motifs, images, and symbols. The only thing that's really just an image is the knife. Sharp, violent, raised up to kill, but doesn't kill. Probably important. The shell, representing order, unity, and conflict resolution. When you have conflict, but you have a way of resolving it that's orderly, that's a good thing. And we see that in the first meeting when they have to decide who the chief is going to be. Next, we have the mountain. At the top of the mountain is friendship, triumph, and domination, as I said. We have imagery of pig, and this motif of a pig is going to be throughout, obviously, anytime with the mention of Piggy's name, but obviously there are pigs on this island. Anything that reminds us of a pig, there's this motif going throughout. Why is that? What is it about the pig? And in chapter 8, there's going to be a very big moment with a pig, which I can't describe yet, but just keep in mind, what is it about this motif of the pig? Why the pig? There's some good questions to ask. Finally, the snake, it's mentioned a couple times, and the first time that the beastie is mentioned, which will be in chapter 4, I think, it's described as a snake thing. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's in the next chapter. It's described as a snake thing, chapter 2, which I'll talk about next time. So be looking out for snake imagery. Now I have some questions that maybe you want to ask as we come to the end of the first chapter. First, do the boys come to the island innocent, evil, or good? Each of them. Think about them. How is their behavior when they arrive? Next, what do the boys desire at this point? Desire is huge. We have lots and lots of different types of desire. And so when they get there, what do they want? And how's that going to change through the course of the novel? And then finally, who has a strong will? That they just kind of have this way of exerting their will on the island, and they're not willing to give up until they get what they want, and who has a very weak will on the island, because those are important things to consider. Lastly is the scar, which was an image that I had forgotten to put in here until I just thought of it. The scar, as you'll recall, is the area where the plane hits the island, and where plane hits island. And the question is, why is it called a scar? So consider that as well. That's probably significant. I hope that this has been a nice overview of the chapter. I hope that it gets you thinking, and it also helps you to remember names and kind of descriptions, and you can start to see the things that are going to be important later on. So I hope this has been very helpful for you.